Jim, tell me a little bit about the Hunger Project and your mission.
Sure. Well, our vision is a world without hunger. It's that simple, but it's actually a very bold declaration to envision a world without hunger. We were founded in the late 1970s. There were organizations that existed at the time to alleviate suffering or to reduce suffering in the world. And we said, you know what, we're going to commit ourselves to ending world hunger, to eradicating extreme poverty and hunger from the planet. So we began that work in the late 1970s. Our mission is to facilitate individual and collective action to transform systems of inequity that create hunger and cause it to persist. That's a long, complex statement, but I'll say what we're not that might be helpful. We don't feed people. We don't give handouts. The first thing people think of when they think of world hunger is probably, well, giving food to people. But actually, uh, when you look at the number of people in the world who die from hunger, a very, very small percentage, less than 10%, die because they starve to death. Over 90% of the people who die from hunger in the world simply live in a condition of chronic, persistent poverty and hunger. They're the poorest people in the world, people who live in extremely resource poor conditions. And so our mission is really aimed at that roughly 92% of the people who die from hunger. You'll see in those areas where in rural low income countries, there are very high child mortality rates, infant mortality rates, very high maternal mortality rates. People don't have access to adequate health care, basic education, clean water. All the different issues are intertwined. We're really out to transform that whole thing. It's not an overnight sensation. It's a long-term game. It's a long game of changing the way the world works.
Can you share some specific examples of how the impact of your programs have been, come to light, and how it's helping to kind of reduce, poverty or hunger across the world?
Sure. Well, let me say a couple things about this, the way we're structured that I think are important. We work in low-income countries in South Asia. We work in India, in Bangladesh. We work in 9 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and we work in rural areas in Mexico with indigenous people, mostly who don't even speak Spanish. They speak indigenous languages. And the work we do in those countries is all carried out by people from those countries who live in those countries. So they're either what's called national staff or indigenous staff. So in Malawi, all the staff who are engaging in the programs of the Hunger Project are Malawian. We're not sending folks that look like me over to tell people what to do in Bangladesh or teach people how to fish in places where they've known how to fish for centuries. So our local staff are going out to rural villages in their countries and mobilizing people to really change the way they think about themselves and the way they relate to their potential and their future. And they're really enlisting local leadership in these rural villages to become the authors of their own development. We really believe that people, rather than sort of a beneficiary model where you're an expert or you're someone who has a lot and you're giving it people who don't have enough, that's not the model we follow. Our model is one of recognizing and relating to people as they have the right and responsibility to be the authors of their own future, the authors of their own development process. So that informs everything about the way our work is designed.
So it's almost like changing their mindset to say, hey, this is the way that, how it should be, and this is the possibilities. And, do you feel like some of these people in these poor countries just, they don't know any different? So that's just the way they live. And there's really nothing that is pushing them to strive for any more.
Well, to some extent, people, and I love that you said changing mindsets. That's a phrase that we use all the time. It is the doorway into our work is changing mindsets, changing the way people think and the way they relate to themselves and their community and their future, really taking ownership. And so, I think one of the things that makes that important is that the idea of international development started after World War II. So about 70 years ago, the world started trying to help. and save the rest of the poor people of the world. And they engaged in a lot of very well-intentioned efforts that sometimes had unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences is that it developed a dependency mindset in cultures around the world where organizations were coming with things that they were giving to people, handouts, building a new latrine or a well, or installing a health facility, and people became reliant on outside organizations coming to help. And it actually undermines the development of leadership and self-reliance among the people in that community. So one of the first things that happens in our work is something which we call the Vision, Commitment, and Action Workshop. So we actually invite all the members of the community to participate in a vision process. Again, I want to say, when we invite them, it's not me, it's our local staff in Bangladesh, our Bangladeshi staff, inviting Bangladeshi people living in a village to sit down and go through a workshop where they envision a future without hunger. And they're then invited to commit themselves to achieving that future, and they begin to design some simple actions they can take in their community without any funding from us, things they can do to move things forward toward that vision. And that's the beginning of the process. Usually hundreds of people attend that workshop, but there's always a handful, maybe 7 or 10 or 12 of them, who come forward afterwards and they say, this is what I've been waiting for my whole life. I want to become, how do I learn how to do this? How can I help? And we turn those people into village mobilizers. They become, they're the most charismatic, passionate people in the community. And so they become volunteer, we call them animators, who mobilize the villagers to do all the things they can do to move life forward for them.
Yeah, I can almost envision that you just need a few leaders in that community to really understand and get it and kind of take charge to kind of lead the group. Because you're right, not everybody is going to understand or pick up on the vision, but you just need a handful of people that get it and that are willing to take charge and say, enough is enough. This is how we can implement it and grow.
Yes, exactly. There are people in every community who recognize that the way they've been going at it isn't working, that there's some untapped potential, and they want the freedom to be able to create their own future. One of the things that people hear about when they begin to encounter the Hunger Project that also people need to kind of wrap their heads around is we talk a lot about women's leadership and girls having equal voice and equal participation. So a lot of times in that initial workshop, there are some people who are sitting there with their arms folded, like, I'm not sure how I feel about this. And sometimes the men are a little reluctant to get on board at the beginning. But there are always some combination of what we like to call a partnership between courageous women and enlightened men who step forward and who see the light. The light goes on for them, like, wow, this is what we've been waiting for. And that partnership moves things forward.
And how many villages or communities are there that you have to do this? And how many of these meetings are you having that you're trying to help these groups of people?
Well, I'm gonna pull out my little cheat sheet for that one. So I can tell you in 2023, just highlight some of the results. So, let me go back and just say, in terms of the basic numbers, there's about 7.5 billion, maybe 8 billion people on the planet. Almost 1 billion people are living in a condition of chronic, persistent poverty and hunger throughout their
Hmm.
lives. So over 800 million people live in this, basically living on income of less than $2 a day. And so those are the regions where we work. We're not everywhere where that exists, but we're in all the regions of the world: South Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and rural Latin America, where you'll find those kinds of society-wide problems. And so it's those places that are the target of our mission, and we are. We're a fairly modest size organization, a budget of a little over $20 million a year, but we reach over 12 million people with our programs. Let's just see here. We look at the number of communities. Well, in 2023, almost 24,000 women participated in our leadership courses. Um, Almost 19,000 participated in our campaigns to stop violence against women. 32,000 people participated in income generating and skills workshops. 75,000 people were trained in water and sanitation. So it's we're in around 13,000 communities in rural areas around the world, reaching about 12 million people.
What do you think is kind of the cause for some of these communities having such poverty? Is it they're so far away from big cities? Is it a government that's kind of suppressing them and kind of pushing them away and not paying attention to them? Have you noticed or seen what could be causing some of this? I guess mindset of this is just who we are, where we are, and this is all we're good for.
Well, yeah, it's really a combination of everything you just said and some other factors. I mean, part of it is just a matter of development not reaching everywhere in the planet at the same time. So, I mean, 500 years ago, there were a handful of people that were rich, and all of our ancestors, I don't know about you, if you descend from royalty, maybe not, but for most of us, our ancestors were poor. Everybody was poor 500 years ago. And over the last several hundred years, development has come at a different pace to different parts of the world. And people's lives are, I think in America, we fiercely believe in the individual independence and what we can do for ourselves. But if you look at it, if you take a step back and you're honest with yourself, you'll see that people's lives are more, the majority of how our lives turns out is a function of where we were born and the family or community or society we were born into. So the average person in Hungary or Poland, their life is going to look different and have different potential than the life of someone born in Canada or the United States or Japan. So people born in rural Senegal, they're starting at a different place in the game of life.
Hmm. Well, and it's also the people that influence you the most are your parents and then their parents and the older people around you, right? And if they're not instilling a different way of thinking, it's just going to go from generation to generation, and there's really going to
Yes.
be no improvement.
I do want to say, though, also just to sort of poke at one of the myths that people might have, is that what we found in our experience is that people who live in these resource poor conditions are hardworking, creative, intelligent. Uh, they are people who are committed to their lives working out and to the survival of their children, the health and well-being of everyone around them. It's really a lack of opportunity and a lack of resources around them that determines how life goes for them more than anything else. So they're not sort of lying around poor, helpless, wondering if someone's going to come and save them. They're doing the best they can with the resources that are available to make ends meet, to make life better for themselves.
Hmm. How do you measure the effectiveness of what the Hunger Project is doing and having on these communities?
A great question. At the Hunger Project, we've actually developed a state of the art, what's called a monitoring, evaluation, and learning department. So it's a very sophisticated approach to benchmarking how a community measures on several different benchmarks, and then keeping track of that over time to see what the outcomes are. And a lot of organizations, one of the tendencies in the international development world is to just measure what you do. Like we delivered this many packages if you're in the relief business, or we delivered this many trainings. It's easy to measure what you do, your activities. The much harder thing is to measure the outcomes. And we've really uh, given ourselves the challenge over the last 20, 30 years to develop a very robust, sophisticated, we call it MEL, monitoring, evaluation, and learning function in our organization. And we actually enlist, another somewhat unusual approach, we enlist the members of the community to be part of that process. So they are active participants in benchmarking and taking ownership. Again, it's all about ownership and responsibility, taking ownership of that measurement process and even setting the goals for themselves and then seeing how they do.
Hmm. Let's go back to the local leaders that you create for these communities. How does what role do the local leaders play in sustaining the impact of the program in these communities? And then second part of that question is how do you ensure that they continually refine their leadership and their training so that they can keep going forward with kind of what you teach and they can kind of keep teaching the rest of the community?
Yes, well, we do have in the beginning of our partnership with the community, there will be a project officer, like a field officer who's responsible for a community and visits with some regularity to partner with those local animators and support them in any way that they need to be supported. And over time, they may find that they need to visit less frequently. We've had enormous success in our strategy in Africa. And by the way, our strategies are different in different regions because the conditions and the culture and the windows of opportunity are different. But in Africa, we mobilize what we call an epicenter community, which is built around a cluster of villages with a geographic center where the community actually builds a building that houses a healthcare facility and a microfinance bank, a food storage facility, food production facilities, a variety of things that help the community begin to thrive and prosper. And they have a management committee of at least 10 people, at least, and it has to be at least half of them have to be women. And what we found is that we've launched over 120 of these epicenter communities over the last 25 years. And over 70 of them have declared self-reliance. What does that mean? It means that they made benchmarks when they started of what it would mean for them to achieve a level of self-reliance that was sustainable, where they wouldn't need the Hunger Project anymore. They wouldn't need funding or staff support from us. So we have an exit strategy with these communities, and that has actually come to fruition in over 70 of those epicenter communities where they've declared self-reliance, and we will check in from time to time and just monitor their success. They've developed ways of communicating with each other so that they can share best practices. If we had a breakthrough in drip irrigation probably 20 years ago, it's been in Africa. And as soon as one community achieved that breakthrough, that got spread to all of the communities around the 9 countries where we work in Africa. So there are channels for communicating best practices and for keeping the inspiration and the success going.
Mm. That's amazing. I mean, so you said 100 and how many? 100.
We had over 120 epicenter communities that we have launched, and now over 70 of them that have declared self-reliance.
Yeah, that's a great number. That's a great stat right there.
Yeah.
With as far as engaging with the organization and supporting the mission, how can individuals engage with the Hunger Project, and how can they support you in your growth?
Well, the thing that I say that we all is sort of one of my former bosses used to talk about different roles, the same goals. So there's an opportunity for people in this part of the world. And this is my favorite thing. I became an investor in the Hunger Project a long time ago. It was actually 1982 when I first discovered the Hunger Project. I was a year out of law school, beginning my career in corporate law, and I discovered the Hunger Project, and I became an investor. We call our donors investors because we really also, just as our programs in low-income countries are somewhat unorthodox, we have a bit of an unorthodox approach to raising money to fund our work. So it's not just a matter of asking people to sacrifice themselves or to feel guilty about something so that they can help out. We reject that kind of language, that kind of thinking. We're inviting people to be part of ending world hunger, the same way we're inviting a woman in rural Burkina Faso to start a business in her community and to take out a loan. We're inviting her to step up and be part of ending world hunger from the resources available to her and giving herself and her ingenuity and her labor. We invite people in this part of the world to invest the resources that they have available, which is money and their voice and sharing with other people and spreading the word. So we're really good in this part of the world at generating wealth. And we allocate that wealth to all sorts of different things. And sometimes we don't think very hard about how we're allocating our wealth. And so we invite people to really become conscious about their spending, about their wealth, about the resources available to them, and to really look at what's meaningful. And we're not trying to get anybody to do something that they don't want to do. We're inviting people to get in touch with the vision they have for a world that works for everyone, and then to just take the action that's natural for them to bring that world into reality. That's how I got into this. Someone told me what was going on in the world in terms of how many people there were that were hungry in the world, and I was shocked just to hear the numbers. And I thought, okay, what can I do about that? I really think that almost all of us want to live in a world. See, when we achieve a world without hunger, it's going to change the world for us too. We're going to live in a different world. We're going to wake up every day in a different kind of world when there's no one in the world that's hungry. It's not just the people who are experiencing hunger whose lives are going to be different.
Well, and I know we're coming up on World Hunger Day. Can you elaborate on World Hunger Day and your organization's involvement in it?
Sure. Well, we actually created World Hunger Day. It was funny. Our director of one of our programs in Great Britain, in the UK, we raise money in the UK. We don't deliver programs there, but we raise money in the UK. And one of our directors there thought, hey, there ought to be a day to celebrate, ending world hunger. And looked on the calendar and was surprised to find that there wasn't one already. So we invented and declared about, I'm going to say 11 or 12 years ago, we invented World Hunger Day, and we started to share with like-minded organizations and invite them to join us in an alliance to use this as an opportunity to publicize world hunger and what people can do to end world hunger throughout the world. So it's something that just took off. It's gained a life of its own. It's celebrated by millions of people and hundreds, if not thousands, of organizations around the planet. And it's on May 28th. And there'll be a series of opportunities to participate in fundraising or be on webinars and learn more about world hunger. I think I've shared with you all the links that you can post with this podcast to let people know how they can find out more about it.
Yep, we'll make sure to include all of those links in the description. But I guess the moral of that last story there is if there's not a day for your organization, just go ahead and make one up. It doesn't matter. Just get it out there, build the awareness, work with other organizations to say, hey, this is the day we're all going to come together and we're going to do it every single year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Is there any advice you'd give to you can give to smaller nonprofits that are just kind of getting started and they want to, do good in their community, but, get them, what is that advice that you would have for them to kind of keep following their passion and try to kind of make a big impact in their community?
Well, I think I'll say a couple things, and I'm mostly speaking from the experience as a fundraiser. So I will say that, first of all, having a clear mission and being passionate about that mission. I mean, it has to be something you actually genuinely care about and not just a job that you're doing. And so having a clear mission and then reaching out and communicating with people about it and not getting hung up on whether not everyone's going to love your mission. Okay. And not everyone needs to love your mission. So don't spend a lot of time trying to get people to care about something that they don't care about. I think, I'm glad that someone is working on finding a cure to leukemia. I'm not passionate about finding a cure to leukemia. So if you come to me and ask me to invest in, donate to ending leukemia, I might make a token contribution, but I'm not going to be drawn in and get involved. And it would be a mistake for you to spend a lot of time trying to get me to care about it. Move on, talk to the next person you can talk to, and keep going, and you will find your tribe. You'll find the people who have an affinity for the issue that you're reaching out to them about. And those are the people you want to bring in and deepen their understanding of the impact they can have. So you want to start making a difference with your mission and then share that difference with people. When people see the impact they could have, if they're drawn to that mission, they'll want to be involved. So you're not trying to get people, again, you're not trying to get anybody to do something that they don't want to do. You don't need that. There's enough people in the world. You'll find the people you need to fund your mission.
It's almost like a, for-profit business. Not everybody is your ideal client. And you know what? You have to search them out and find them. And they're going to be the ones that will buy into your mission and into your story, and become either donors or volunteers, or help you, make the impact that you're looking for.
Exactly. And I think it's important to speak to people's greatness and not to their, again, I know I said this earlier, but I'll say it again. A lot of people come, I have people come knock on my door from time to time soliciting for something, and they're apologetic. I'm sorry to bother you. I'm sorry. If you could just give us even just five. I'll tell you, when I get these messages from political organizations asking me to just contribute $1, I'm like, what do you, that's an insult to me. Don't insult me by asking me for $1. Ask me for a huge amount of money. Ask me for an amount of money that causes me to have to think of myself differently. Now, maybe not $1,000 for the first time, but ask me for a lot, and then let me sort out what I can do. And so speak to people's greatness and how resourceful they are.
I love that. Last question, and we'll wrap it up. How, when you're talking to, and talking about the Hunger Project, how big is storytelling to really kind of drawing people in and getting them to really feel either the pain that these communities are having, or feel the joy of the impact that your organization is providing? Storytelling has been a big thing that nonprofits, I'm trying to teach nonprofits. Like, one of my big things that I do is I help smaller nonprofits scale. And storytelling is such a big portion of that. And so many people don't spend the time to develop a good story around their organization, around their mission, to really draw people in and pull at the heartstrings and really try to get their point across. How do you kind of use storytelling to your advantage of getting out the mission of the Hunger Project and sharing some of the success stories of the impact?
Well, we use it all the time, and it is critical. You're right. And so, I've been fortunate to myself be able to visit our programs in the countries where we work. I've been to Bangladesh. I've been to Ghana and Uganda and Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, rural Mexico, meeting with indigenous women where we have double translation. They speak in Tzotzil in rural Chiapas. Someone translates from Tzotzil to Spanish. Someone else translates from Spanish to English. And I find out a couple minutes later why the woman was crying when she was talking. So, getting in touch with the actual stories of the people that you're making a difference with, and then really taking the time to craft how to tell that story in a way that's inspirational. And again, we do talk about the conditions that people are dealing with, but I think what most people want to hear is they want to hear something that conveys success. They want to hear about the triumph of our partners over the conditions that they're dealing with. And those are the stories that I like to tell. I have a tendency to want to talk about the big numbers. We reached 10,000 people with this program, but what really makes the most difference in moving people to action is hearing a story of one individual or a family and how their life was changed by their partnership with the Hunger Project.
Jim, that was great. Well, Jim Goodman, thank you so much for being here. World Hunger Day is coming up right around the corner. Jim with the Hunger Project, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story.
Thank you very much for having us. It's just an honor to be here.